The midnight sky of New Damascus glittered with unfamiliar constellations as James Harrison tracked his prey through winding streets slick with artificial rain. His boots splashed through puddles reflecting neon signs in alien scripts, while beside him padded Luna, her black and silver coat blending with the shadows. The German shepherd's ears were pricked forward, nose working overtime as she followed the scent trail that had already led them across 3 districts of this frontier world's largest spaceport city. "Got something, girl?" James whispered, noting how Luna's stride had become more purposeful. After 8 years together, he could read her body language as clearly as any tracking display. Her subtle shift in posture told him their quarry was close. Luna's soft woof confirmed it. James checked his stunner's charge, still at 82%. More than enough for this job. The target was a low-level data thief who'd made the mistake of stealing from the wrong megacorp. Simple retrieval, minimal resistance expected. The kind of work that kept fuel in the tank and food in Luna's bowl between bigger contracts. They emerged into a cramped plaza surrounded by towering hab blocks. The rain was heavier here, drumming against corrugated metal overhangs. Luna froze, then looked up at a rusty fire escape zigzagging up one building's face. James followed her gaze and caught movement, a flicker of shadow against shadow. "Good girl," he murmured, scratching behind her ear. "Guard the grand exit." Luna took up position by the ladder's base, while James began to climb, moving as quietly as his frame allowed. The metal was slick, but his gloves found purchase. 3 stories up, he heard labored breathing. The data thief was huddled against a window ledge, a slight figure in a hooded coat. They startled at James's appearance, scrambling backward. "Stay back. I've got nothing worth dying for." "Then this'll be easy," James said, keeping his voice level. "The data chip you lifted from Vertex Corp, hand it over and we all go home happy." He took a careful step forward, conscious of the wet metal under his boots. The thief's hand darted to their pocket. James tensed, but they produced a small crystal chip. "Here, take it. Just don't hurt me." James reached for the chip, and the thief's other hand whipped out a small pistol. Before they could aim, Luna's warning bark echoed from below. The momentary distraction was all James needed to close the distance and knock the weapon aside. It clattered down to the plaza as he pinned the thief against the wall. "That was stupid," he growled, securing their wrists with binders. "Luna, all clear." But Luna's reply was a snarl that raised the hair on James's neck. He spun, dragging the thief with him, in time to see 3 figures emerge from different alleys. Their environment suits marked them as Centaurians, notorious opportunists who preyed on bounty hunters, waiting until the hard work was done before stealing both quarry and reward. The human and his beast, one called up in accented standard. "Surrender the prize, and perhaps we let you live." James's free hand went to his stunner, mind racing through options. The Centaurians were spreading out, pulse rifles trained upward. Luna stood her ground below, hackles raised, but she was exposed. One good shot. "Last warning," the leader called, "or we start with the animal." James saw Luna's muscles bunching, knew she was about to launch herself at the nearest threat. His heart clenched. She'd never back down, never run, even against impossible odds. It was what made her perfect. It was what made her vulnerable. "Hold, Luna," he commanded. To the Centaurians, "All right. No need for things to get messy. I'm coming down." He kept his movements slow, deliberate, guiding the thief toward the ladder. The leader gestured with his rifle. "The data chip. Throw it down." "Sure thing." James palmed the chip, made a show of tossing it. As 3 sets of eyes tracked the glinting crystal, he threw himself sideways, stunner already drawn. His first shot caught the leader in the chest. Luna was moving before the Centaurian hit the ground, a grey blur of teeth and fury targeting the rightmost attacker. James's second shot dropped another, but the third managed to snap off a wild burst of plasma fire before Luna took him down. The smell of ozone filled the air. Then silence, broken only by the endless rain and Luna's low growls. "Clear," James called. Luna trotted to his side, tail wagging slightly. He ran his hands over her, checking for injuries, then pressed his forehead to hers. "Good girl. The best girl." She licked his chin once, then resumed her professional demeanor as he secured the unconscious Centaurians. Later, with the thief delivered and payment collected, James sat in their small ship's common area while Luna dozed at his feet. He watched her chest rise and fall, remembered that moment of fear when the rifles were trained on her. Some hunters used robots, others worked alone. But Luna was more than a tool or partner. She was family. He scratched her ear, smiling as her tail thumped against the deck. "What do you say we take a break, girl? Head somewhere quiet for a while." Luna's eyes opened, warm brown meeting his gaze with complete trust and devotion. She didn't need to understand his words to understand his meaning. Wherever he went, she would follow. Whatever came, they would face it together. James didn't know it then, but their next job would change everything. The universe was about to learn exactly what happened when someone harmed a human's best friend. 2 weeks after the Centaurian incident, James accepted what seemed like a routine job on Helios Prime. The target, a smuggling operation running contraband biotech through the planet's vast underground cave networks. The pay was good, the intel solid. There was no reason to suspect this would be the day everything changed. Luna led the way through the phosphorescent tunnels, her white-tipped tail held high as she tracked their quarry's scent. The cave's natural bioluminescence cast everything in an eerie blue glow, creating shadows that danced and shifted with their movement. James followed close behind, his boots silent on the mineral-crusted floor. "Steady," he whispered as Luna's pace quickened. The tunnel opened into a larger cavern ahead, its ceiling lost in darkness despite the glowing walls. Crates and containers were stacked in irregular patterns, creating a maze of potential hiding spots. James's tactical display highlighted multiple heat signatures scattered throughout the space. Luna stopped, her body going rigid. Her nose twitched and she let out a low whine, a warning James had learned to trust. Something was wrong. The scent trail they'd been following. It was too obvious, too clean. "Back," he commanded softly, but it was already too late. Lights blazed from hidden projectors, flooding the cavern with harsh white brilliance. James threw up an arm to shield his eyes as figures emerged from behind the crates, not the local smugglers he'd expected, but members of the Zerkari Syndicate. Their chitinous armor and multiple eyes marked them as members of the galaxy's most ruthless criminal organization. The famous hunting pair clicked their leader, mandibles flexing beneath his environmental mask. "We've been watching you, James Harrison. Your reputation grows. Troublesome." James's hand moved toward his weapon, but a dozen targeting lasers instantly painted his chest. Luna growled, pressing against his leg, ready to attack despite the overwhelming odds. "Your kind's attachment to lesser beings has always fascinated us," the Zerkari continued. "Such vulnerability." He gestured, and more syndicate members emerged, forming a tight circle. "Consider this a message. Stay out of Zerkari territory." Everything happened in seconds. Multiple stun nets deployed simultaneously. James managed to dodge one, but Luna was caught mid-leap as she tried to protect him. The energy mesh wrapped around her, delivering paralyzing shocks designed to incapacitate much larger prey. Luna. James's world narrowed to her yelp of pain. He fired wildly, dropping 2 Zakari before something hit him from behind. He stumbled, vision blurring, aware of Luna still struggling against the net despite the devastating current coursing through her body. Enough games, the leader hissed. End this. A Zakari warrior stepped forward, raising a crystalline weapon James had never seen before. It hummed with an odd resonance that made his teeth ache. The blast that followed wasn't plasma or laser. It was something else, something that bent the very light around it. Luna saw the threat. Even trapped, even in agony, her only thought was protecting her human. She managed to roll, taking the full force of the blast meant for James. The sound she made would haunt him forever. No, James broke free of his attacker, emptying his weapon into the warrior with the crystal gun. More stun blasts hit him, but he fought through them, desperate to reach Luna. The net around her was smoking, her fur singed, but she was still breathing. Barely. The Zakari leader made a sound like breaking glass. Laughter. Remember this pain, human. Remember what happens when you interfere with powers beyond your understanding. A flashbang detonated, filling the cavern with blinding light and deafening sound. When James could see again, the Zakari were gone. He crawled to Luna, hands shaking as he deactivated the net. She whimpered weakly as he gathered her in his arms, her loyal eyes finding his despite her pain. "Stay with me, girl," he pleaded, already running for the tunnel that would lead them back to the surface. "Stay with me." Luna tried to lick his hand, always trying to comfort him, even now. The next hours passed in a blur. The nearest veterinary facility was basic, not equipped for the strange weapon's effects. They stabilized Luna, but the prognosis was grim. The blast had done something to her at a cellular level, causing cascading damage that their technology couldn't fully address. James sat beside her medical pod, watching her vital signs slowly deteriorate despite everything the doctors tried. He held her paw through the pod's access port, remembering all the times she'd saved him, not just from physical dangers, but from the loneliness and darkness that came with their chosen life. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, pressing his forehead against the cool surface of the pod. Luna's tail thumped once, weakly, against the padding. Even dying, she tried to tell him it wasn't his fault. Dawn was breaking over Helios Prime when Luna's signs finally flatlined. James stayed until they covered her, until there was nothing left but a cold emptiness in his chest and a burning need for answers, for revenge. The Zakari had meant to send a message. They had succeeded beyond their darkest expectations. As James walked out of the clinic into the alien sunrise, he made a silent vow. He would dismantle their entire organization, piece by piece. He would make them understand exactly what they had awakened. They thought they knew human attachment. They were about to learn about human vengeance. 3 months after Luna's death, the name Pet's master began circulating in the criminal underworld. It started as whispers in shadowy bars on frontier worlds, tales of Zakari operations mysteriously going dark, supply chains disrupted, key lieutenants vanishing, all traced back to a human hunter who moved like a ghost and never left survivors. James stood in the rain on New Singapore, studying the neon-lit entrance of the Crimson Nebula Casino. His tactical display highlighted the Zakari security patterns, but he barely needed it anymore. He'd spent weeks studying their protocols, learning their habits. The Zakari were creatures of pattern. their insectoid nature making them predictable to those who knew what to look for. Around his neck hung Luna's collar, its silver tag a constant reminder of why he was here. Intelligence suggested Vorkath, the Zerkari's regional enforcer, was inside. He'd been present in the caves that day. James had memorized every face. "Interesting hunting ground you've chosen," came a melodic voice behind him. James spun, weapon half-drawn, to find a Lysithine observer watching him with multifaceted eyes. Her crystalline form shifted colors in the neon light. "Not hunting," James replied carefully. The Lysithines were known for their neutrality and their extensive information networks. Just enjoying the nightlife. Of course, she moved closer, her crystalline body chiming softly. Just as 3 Zakari weapons depots enjoyed spontaneous combustion last week, and their primary shipping hub on Proxima Theri enjoyed a complete system failure that exposed their entire operation. James said nothing, but his hand stayed near his weapon. The Lysithine made a sound like wind through crystal. "Peace, Bet's master. I come with an offer, not a threat. The Zerkari's influence grows troublesome to many. Their methods lack subtlety." She extended a crystalline tendril, projecting a holographic map. "Their primary processing center for that weapon you seek, the one that killed your companion. The plans were acquired at great cost." James studied the projection, memorizing details. "Why help me?" "Balance must be maintained. The Zerkari forget their place." And she shifted hue slightly. "Some of us understand the bond between species. The loss of a companion resonates, even among crystalline minds." Before James could respond, her color shifted to warning red. "They're moving Vorkath. Service entrance. 2 minutes." James nodded once in thanks and melted into the shadows. He moved through maintenance corridors and ventilation spaces, his steps silent despite his speed. Luna had taught him the value of stealth over brute force. The thought brought a familiar ache, but he channeled it into focus. He caught up to Vorkath's security detail near the private landing pad. The Zerkari enforcer was surrounded by 6 guards, all armed with the latest weapons. James counted heartbeats, waiting for the perfect moment. The first guard died without a sound, a neurotoxin dart in his neck. The second fell moments later. By the time the others noticed something was wrong, James was among them like a vengeful spirit. His combat style had changed since Luna's death, economical, ruthless, not a movement wasted. Vorkath tried to run. They always did. James caught him with a boulder that tangled his 4 legs, sending him crashing down. The enforcer rolled, mandibles clicking in desperation. "Wait, I can pay, whatever price." "Where's the weapon facility?" James's voice was ice. "You don't understand what you're interfering with. The Zakari serve a greeter." James applied pressure to one of Vorkath's leg joints. The clicking became a shriek. "The facility." Epsilon 9. The research station orbits Epsilon 9. Vorkath's multiple eyes darted frantically. "But you'll never reach it." "The defenses." "I already have what I need." James stood, regarding the fallen enforcer coldly. "You were there that day. You watched her die. The beast. That's what this is about." Vorkath's mandibles twisted in what might have been a sneer. "Your kind's weakness for lesser creatures." The rest was lost in a gurgle, as James's blade found a gap in the enforcer's carapace. He watched the light fade from those compound eyes, feeling nothing but a cold satisfaction. Later, in his ship's cabin, James added another mark to his list. The Zerkari hierarchy was vast, but it wasn't infinite. Each elimination brought him closer to the leadership, closer to understanding why they'd targeted him specifically. The crystal weapon wasn't standard Zerkari tech. It represented something new, something they were willing to kill to protect. He touched Luna's collar gently. "Getting closer, girl," he whispered to the empty room. Sometimes, in the silence of space, he could almost hear her reassuring whine, feel the phantom warmth of her pressing against his leg. The pain never lessened, but it had crystallized into something harder than diamond, sharper than any blade. The Lysithian's intelligence proved reliable. Epsilon 9 would be heavily defended, but that didn't matter. The Zerkari were about to learn that all their defenses, all their weapons, meant nothing against a human with nothing left to lose. The ship's computer chimed, pulling him from his thoughts. Multiple encrypted messages were coming in, other species offering aid, sharing intelligence. The Zerkari's enemies were legion, and the pet's master had become a rallying point for their resentment. James began sorting through the data. Somewhere in this web of information was the key to infiltrating Epsilon 9. Luna had taught him patience in tracking prey. He would honor that lesson one last time. The hunt was entering its final phase. The space station orbiting Epsilon 9 resembled a massive crystalline spider, its spires glowing with an eerie internal light. James studied it from the bridge of the Talaxian stealth ship he'd borrowed, while beside him stood his unlikely ally, Orthak, a towering drachnid warrior whose scales shifted color with his emotions. "The Zerkari killed my entire clutch," Orthak rumbled, his scales flickering red with remembered rage. "Used them to test their new weapons. When I heard of the pet's master, I knew the time for vengeance had come." James nodded, understanding completely. The Zerkari's experiments had gone far beyond simple crime. They were developing something that violated the natural order itself. The crystal weapon that killed Luna was just the beginning. Their infiltration plan was simple but dangerous. Orthak would pose as a seller of rare biotech, something the Zerkari couldn't resist. James would hide inside a specially shielded cargo container, bypassing the station's human detection systems. As they made final preparations, Orthak studied James with ancient eyes. "You humans, your capacity for love makes you vulnerable, but your capacity for vengeance makes you unstoppable." James touched Luna's collar. They're about to learn that lesson. The Zerkari High Council chamber was a cathedral of crystalline horror. Massive geometric shapes pulsed with otherworldly energy, and in the center, a device James recognized, a larger version of the weapon that had killed Luna. "Magnificent, isn't it?" The Zerkari Supreme Director's voice echoed through the chamber. "We discovered it in deep space, technology beyond anything known. It doesn't just kill. It unravels the very bonds that hold matter together. Perfect for reshaping the galaxy in our image." James emerged from his hiding spot, weapons ready. Around him lay the bodies of Zerkari guards, taken down during his silent advance through the station. Orthak's distraction in the loading bay had worked perfectly. All this because of a pet. The director clicked, mandibles twitching. "You've decimated our operations, destroyed years of work." "Her name was Luna," James said quietly. "She was family." "Family? She was an animal, a simple beast. And look what her death created, a monster woe." "No," James interrupted. "You created this. Luna taught me loyalty, love, compassion. You taught me how to be merciless." The director lunged for the crystal weapons controls. James was faster. The battle that followed was brief but violent. When it ended, James stood alone among the broken crystals and fallen Zerkari, Luna's collar clutched in his hand. He activated the charges he planted throughout the station. As alarms blared, he made his way to the escape pod, Arthak's voice guiding him through the chaos via comms. Behind him, the Zerkari's grand experiment began to collapse. Later, watching the station explode from a safe distance, James felt no triumph. Just a quiet certainty that Luna would have approved. She had always protected him from monsters. In the end, he had returned the favor by protecting the galaxy from something far worse. What now? Arthak asked as debris scattered across space like fallen stars. James touched Luna's collar one last time, then carefully placed it in a small memorial box he'd carried since that day. Now we make sure no one else loses family to creatures like them. The stars streaked past as they jumped to hyperspace. Somewhere in the vast darkness, other threats waited. But they would face them differently now, not for revenge, but for protection. Luna had shown him how to love. The Zerkari had shown him how to hunt. He would use both lessons to ensure no other human would have to learn the price of harming what they loved. In the end, the galaxy learned 3 vital truths. Never underestimate human love. Never forget human vengeance. And never, ever harm a human's pet.